If you're anything like me, I'm sure you've had a well-meaning teacher who tell you to avoid repetition in your writing. And while that's mostly good advice, it risks discouraging the use of a powerful poetic and rhetorical device, Anaphora. In this video, we're going to take a look at what this is and why you should be using it. Repetition isn't inherently bad. Needless repetition is bad. Purposeful repetition, or anaphora, is powerful. The Poetry Foundation defines anaphora as the repetition of a word or words at the beginning of successive phrases, clauses, or lines to create a sonic effect. So what is this sonic effect exactly? Let's listen to it in this passage of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. Walking the path worn in the grass and beat through the leaves of the brush, where the quail is whistling betwixt the woods and the wheat lot, where the bat flies in the 7th month eve, where the great gold bug drops through the dark. Leaves of Grass is full of these anaphoric examples. And so if you open up to Leaves of Grass, you can hear it, the sonic effect. But anaphora is not purely a musical device, which is perhaps why, though many poets use this device, anaphora is most widely utilized by essayists and rhetoricians. In his truly essential Poet's Glossary, Edward Hirsch cites a rhetoric book from the 1500s that dubs anaphora the marcher. Listen to the way Sherman Alexie's words march along in his famous literacy narrative, Superman and Me. I refused to fail. I was smart. I was arrogant. I was lucky. I read books late into the night until I could barely keep my eyes open. I read books at recess, then during lunch, and then in the few minutes left after I had finished my classroom assignments. I read books in the car when my family traveled to powwows or basketball games. In shopping malls, I ran to the bookstores and read bits and pieces of as many books as I could. I read the books my father brought home from the pawn shops in the second hand. I read the books I borrowed from the library. I read the backs of cereal boxes. I read the newspaper. I read the bulletins posted on the walls of the school, the clinic, the tribal offices, the post office. I read junk mail. I read auto repair manuals. I read magazines. I read anything that had words and paragraphs. I read with equal parts joy and desperation. I loved those books, but I also knew that love had only one purpose. I was trying to save my life. Every sentence, in fact, nearly every phrase of this paragraph starts with I, verb. But the paragraph is far from boring or monotonous. Instead, anaphora drives the paragraph like a locomotive. And like a locomotive, it's rhythmic. The anaphora becomes an underscore. And when it changes, when it stops, we stop. And we take notice of the last sentence in a way we never would have had the previous sentences not set us up for it. Again to Edward Hirsch. The key to anaphora is that each line is repetition with a difference. Listen to this excerpt from Sarah Vowell's incredibly attention-grabbing essay, Shooting Dad. I'll do it, too. I will have my father's body burned into ashes. I will pack these ashes into paper bags. I will go to the mountains with my mother, my sister, and the cannon. I will plunge his remains into the barrel and point it into a hill so that he doesn't take anyone with him. I will light the fuse. But I will not cover my ears, because when I blow what used to be my dad into the earth, I want it to hurt. All the I wills lull us into the rhythm of the paragraph, and then the ambience is cut off, like an air conditioner that's been running for hours and suddenly stops. The but I will not makes what's not there very, very evident. So we have poets and we have essayists. But perhaps it is the rhetorician, the speech givers, that most truly understand the power of anaphora. Let's take one of the most famous speeches of all time, Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream. Now, a lot of people have read excerpts of this speech or seen excerpts of it, but very few people have actually read the entire thing, and I really encourage you to do that when you get a chance. I'll put a link in the description. And you'll notice, if you do read that the I Have a Dream title is there because I Have a Dream is a powerful piece of anaphora. That phrase shows up 9 times in this speech. But that's not the only example of anaphora. Unless you think that anaphora is just something you use when talking about yourself in the first person, it can also be a call to action. Again, in the I Have a Dream speech, look at the phrase go back to. Here you see that phrase show up 7 times in the speech, and 6 of them are really tightly packed together in the same sentence. Again, no teacher is going to tell Martin Luther King Jr. that this is a boring essay or a boring speech. Anaphora is repetition with purpose. If you're analyzing an essay or a speech or a poem and you find an example of anaphora, hopefully you now understand how you can talk about it and talk about the way that the poet's using it rhythmically or powerfully, or the speechwriter or the essayist are using it to help drive their point home or point out a key difference in something. But I also hope you use it as a writer, that you experiment with anaphora, that you're not afraid of repetition, that you create bad emulations of the examples you saw in this video until you master it and can use it freely in your own accord. It's really not a terribly difficult poetic device to use. You simply have the repetition and then find ways to change that repetition. And when especially the last thing that you are anaphorizing, the last thing in that paragraph or stanza or speech, whatever it might be, where it changes, where the reader is cut off from that rhythm, that is an incredibly powerful device. So go out there and use some anaphora. Go out there and use repetition. Go out there and like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading.